Are you gonna play with your ball, or are you just gonna sniff it? You just sat on it. Hello! This time we are jumping pretty much straight into the speed build. We're building the habitat of the cute little aardvark that you just saw. Like I said last time, it's going to be mainly an indoor habitat, and there are two reasons for that. One is that the aardvark really likes their privacy. The other is that they are nocturnal animals, and one of the potential expansion packs that there's a lot of speculation about is a nocturnal pack. And if that is what happens, I think an indoor habitat for a nocturnal animal would make a lot of sense. I don't actually think that we'll be getting a nocturnal pack for reasons that I will elaborate on in another video, teaser. But even so, an indoor habitat still makes sense for an aardvark because, as I said, privacy. I'm not going to be narrating every detail of the build. Instead, I'd like to talk about the future of this channel, which is probably super premature since it doesn't really have a past. One thing that should probably definitely happen in the pretty near future is this zoo should have a name. I have been this close to calling it Woodvale, but I already have two zoos with that name, so if anyone has a little bit more imagination, please put a suggestion in the comments. Now, so far, I've only put in African animal. This is not going to be a 100% African zoo, but I have been doing, I guess, just the African section first because I really do like a lot of the animals. The aardvark that we're building for here is one of my absolute favorites. The warthogs for next episode. I love those guys too. Obviously the fennec foxes are completely adorable. And I've never actually had the African penguins before, but they are quickly climbing towards the top of my personal favorite list. By the way, speaking of an African section, that is actually a fairly new way of planning out a zoo, where the animals are placed according to geography. At the very beginning, back in the early to mid 1800s, it was actually pretty random where the different animals were placed. It was like, oh, we have this thing, where do we have space? Plus there were just random things that became fashion, like having a lawn full of flamingos as the first thing you see when you come in. After that, it became normal to place the animals according to their type. So you'd have all of the apes and monkeys in one place, all the big cats in another, and all the bears in actually a fortress of all things. And only later did it become the norm to have geographically themed sections. It's actually an interesting thing to notice, I think, when you visit a zoo, that even though most of it may be structured according to modern principles, you could still find, say, a primate house or a reptile house. Because unlike a project like this one, actual zoos have been built over decades, if not centuries, of change and development. A zoo is a part of history like anything else. Now, in this particular pre-planned place, the next area that I want to start working on after the African one will be either South American or Southeast Asian, because I did say that I love many of the African animals, and that is true. However, my absolute favorite is the tapir, and we have two tapirs in this game, one of which is South American, the other is Asian. So if anyone watching this has a preference as to South America versus Southeast Asia, feel free to drop a comment. I will listen. When it comes to the future of this channel, which is what I was going to talk about and then I didn't, there are two things I'd like to do other than this specific zoo. One of them is a pretty ambitious project, a reconstruction of Copenhagen Zoo, not just as it is today, but as it has been starting back in 1859 when it first opened, recreating version after version. So that is going to be coming to the channel, although I'm not really sure when, because I do want to have a couple of episodes shot, and I need to do some more research, definitely, before even shooting the first episode. So I hope that is something that somebody might be interested in watching. The other thing is I want to do Stupid Sundays. Doesn't mean I'm going to be posting stupid things every Sunday, but I want to reserve some Sundays just for posting messed up experiments. I already uploaded one where I attempted to make a zoo with absolutely no animals, and yeah, well, that didn't exactly go according to plan. Let's get back to the build for a second. I thought this was just a very, very large, very long, very boring white wall. So I wanted to put in a window that is identical to, well, to that one. And it annoys me that we don't just have that in the game, where we have a window that's recolorable and looks identical to the one that is in every single staff building with windows. But yeah, we don't. So I decided to just try to make a copy of it with these flexi-color painted board things. And I actually think it turned out pretty good. It's also taking up an awful lot of the speed build. There we go. Look at that. That's not bad, is it? And I know a lot of people don't really care about the inside of a staff building because, I mean, guests are not supposed to go in there anyway. But I like doing at least just a little bit of detailing in there, so even the backstage areas look somewhat realistic. Putting in some more doors. So when I do these small backstage areas, I like to think about what would you actually need if you were a keeper and you were using that backstage area. So I put in a few tools and a bit of hay that I sort of imagine is what they just swept up into a pile that was just on the floor from putting out new bedding for the little animals and then dragging bits of it out on your shoes. And not that they actually use those tools in game, they have this weird looking sort of leaf blower vacuum cleaner. I guess what I'm doing here is trying to strike a balance between real realism and in-game realism. I should put in a clipboard too. And we're getting to the roof. I redid this roof so many times. I cut probably about half an hour of just putting down the roof, removing the roof, putting down the roof, removing the roof. Roofing is my nemesis. I absolutely hate it. In this one, I've just gone for flat roofs, flat bamboo roofing. It's maybe not the most exciting choice, but I figured if I just use the same sort of look throughout the zoo, that then in conjunction with using the same barriers can make the zoo feel more like thought through. I really do want to experiment more with the roofing and just try some different ideas. I just feel like the roof pieces we have in this game, the grid pieces for the roofing, are pretty limited and limiting, because you have to pretty much work on this 4x4 meter. You kind of have to work on a 4x4 grid. There's so many different roof piece shapes that I wish we had. But since we don't, you can either just do this triangular thing or a flat thing, or you have to get super creative and really get into thinking about the details. And I don't know, roof just, it's never really been something that I enjoy spending hours on. There are plenty of other things I can spend half the day just putting down plants, but the roof is just So if anyone has any awesome roofing tips, how to make a really cool roof really easily, or how to just, I don't know, have more fun making a roof, please do comment. This particular roof, I'm happy with the overall shape of it, and I really do like the skylights, but at the same time I just think these little stupid looking pieces of bamboo just overlapping and not really overlapping, and there are other people out there who do amazing jobs on the roofing, and I never really seem to nail it. And again, doing, redoing, pulling this thing to that side and that thing to this side, plopping down another thing and the thing in the middle and the thing, and the more roofing things. I almost find roof work more frustrating than the pathing system, and that says a lot. And then there are the ceilings, the inside of the roof. Don't even get me started on that. That is just... Because again, I have seen people do some of the most absolutely incredible looking, like Sistine Chapel level ceilings. And meanwhile, my builds are just, okay, sure, you can go inside, just don't look up. Oh, and by the way, apparently this is something you're supposed to say, so if you're still watching, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you. Oh, and also thank you for letting me do like my whole roofing rant. Although I guess you didn't really have much of a choice since I did the rant before you ever had a chance of seeing it. But you didn't zap away. A lot of people probably did, but if you're still here, then you're, well, still here. Yeah. Let's bring in some Ardvarks now. Any minute now. Run, Forest! Whee! Whee! Here we are, making sure the little cuties have the terrain they prefer. I thought they wanted a lot more soil because they're jungle animals, and I mean, you don't really usually have grass growing under trees, but oh well. And just sinking in, hiding the edges of their first enrichment item. What I really like to do here is what you just saw me do, which is sink it in before I place it and then bring the terrain back up to where it was. And also to make sure that the terrain all around it is at that height or higher, because otherwise you can really easily end up having this weird looking ridge if you try using terrain tools to hide just the edge of it. Now this water bowl is not one that I usually choose to use, because the keepers have to manually refill it, which takes more time than it really needs to, because there are other options, like the pond and that ugly dripping faucet. But then I saw the lady designer using it, and she did such a good job of making the thing look like just this natural little pond. She used rocks and plants and things around it, and I thought that looks really good, so I wanted to try. Oh, apparently they're jungle and grassland. Yeah, that makes more sense, because they don't want that many plants. I ended up putting way too many plants in there and then having to remove some of them. In fact, there is so much undo, redo to this process that always ends up getting cut out, because if it's just left in there, it becomes the most frustrating 3-hour speed build you have ever seen. So if you're ever watching somebody's YouTube video and thinking, how do they get it right the first time? We don't. Nobody does. This grass here is one of my favorite plants. I've been using it pretty much every single habitat over here in the African section. And I think it's especially nice when you're trying to sort of blend in the edges of that enrichment item where the food digging box thing. I've seen people using mulch for that as well, and that can work really nicely too.
Yeah, little Ardvarks. You're gonna be so happy.
I like to sort of imagine where would the animals be walking, and then have more soil and less grass in those areas, as if they've been walking back and forth there and wearing it down. What I really like about these aquatic rocks here, the fake ones, what I like about them is you can recolor them to match pretty much any of the other rock series. This one I used mainly the red, but then instead of using a darker color for the cracks, I used more of a yellow because that's what these desert rocks have.
I just thought about the first time I saw an aardvark, and apart from just falling completely in love with this ridiculous looking animal, I just yelled out to my parents, "Look, a kangaroo pig!" I don't know where that word came from, but I mean, you look at the animal. Was I wrong? I was aware, mind you, that this was an actual animal and not some weird genetic mishap. In the same way, I had reindeer in my child head were moose goats. So was that just me? Was I the only kid making up these alternative names for animals based on my associations, or does anyone else out there have an elephant dog or a cat mouse or something? I want to know.
Nobody's gonna know.
I want to know.
Yeah, the reason I just placed one out there is because if you do a copy, Control D, and then immediately switch to a different item, then the color will not transfer to that one. But if you plot one down of the one you have marked and then switch, then you keep the color. So I didn't want to have to redo the coloring on every, like, the new one and then the next one. So just have this random rock sitting out in the path, which I will delete later. And this is the finished result. Little outdoor area and a big area where they can feel private because they do not like being looked at, and in there they think they are not being looked at. I kind of like this building. I like the the swoopiness of it. I noticed when I had the roof off. This is kind of odd. It okay, you can't really see it anymore, but it looks like a fish. Yeah, so there's that.
You're so cute. You're sleeping. I love aardvarks.
This area is still a little boring, but it is better, I guess. Now it has a building on it. Next time, we will be putting in warthogs. And another thing I want to do is put in a little tiny playground right here. So that is the plan for next time. Warthogs and a playground. Until then, bye.